Hello everybody, welcome to this video. Today I'll be showing you how to implement the MTN Mobile Money Open API in Spring Boot. The MTN Mobile Money Open API is a JSON REST API that is used by partner systems to take advantage of services provided by the MTN Mobile Money platform. So in this video, I will show you how to use and implement it correctly inside of a Spring Boot application. Let's go right into it. Now, whenever you want to communicate or consume an external API within your application, the first thing to do is to know about the API that you want to consume. Read the documentation associated with it and know how to use it. So, in the case of the MOMO MTN Open API, this is their official website. So, we will strike right into their documentation section and then read a little bit about it to know, what is the API about and stuff like that. So, I'm interested more in the getting started part because I want to start using it, of course. So what we do is we check this page, and here we'll see that okay, to use this API, you will need to sign up for an account, subscribe to our product, manage your subscription, and generate an API key. So basically, they have detailed explanation of each of these steps. So you sign up for an account, pretty straightforward. Then you pick a product, subscribe to a product. So basically, there are several products here. So let me open the link here to show you. Okay, so here they have quite a few products. They have a product for remittance, disbursement, collection, and this one collection widget. So basically, you subscribe to one of those products, and then you can have access to the APIs associated with that specific product. Then you can manage your subscription, and then you generate an API user and an API key. Alright, so if you need to read more, you can continue and then check the API user and API management to know more about these, what are they, etc. But I will show you, I will tell you more as we develop, integrate the API within our Spring Boot application. So there are a couple of use cases here as well. You can check out use cases that you can have for this service. So you have the request to pay. They have this nice sequence diagram that you can look at to understand what's going on, how the API works, and their documentation is pretty neat. So you have several use cases. Even if you want to make a transfer, that is, you want to transfer money from your wallet to someone else, mobile money wallet, they have a use case here for it, explaining it to you in details. So now, one thing I want to point out is that this API service, they have this API sandbox. Okay, so the API sandbox is like a playground for you to experiment with their service, right? So they have all their products here. Okay, they have all the products here, and then you can pick a specific product that you subscribe to, and then play around with the APIs, test it out, and see how it works. And also they have some guide here showing you how to use it. You can basically implement this API in any language or any framework you wish to implement it in. I want to show you how to do it inside of Spring Boot, okay, using Java. Now we'll go ahead and sign up for an account. So to sign up for an account is pretty straightforward. You come over to sign in, and if you don't have an account, you'll see this place. You need an account. You click on sign up, and you populate your information, get this captcha thing, and then sign up. You receive an email, and then with some link to click. Once you do that, you'll be logged in. I've already created an account, so I'm just gonna log into it and show you how it looks in there. Okay, so now that we have completed, hopefully I hope that you've completed signing up for an account. Once you log in, you'll be presented with this page, similar as before. So, but this time you have your profile, your name here basically, so you can visit your profile and then check it out. They have a really nice interface here. So here you can see your subscriptions, and then you have your applications, etc. And if you don't want to be on the platform anymore, you can close your account, which you shouldn't do for now. Okay, so first thing, we've set up our account. Next, we need to subscribe for our product. So we head out to the products page, like so, and then pick a product. So we pick the remittance product. Okay, so this one will allow you to remit funds to local recipient from diaspora with ease. So you can build an application that you can basically instruct the application to make transfer to somebody who's using mobile money within your country. Like for example, if you have people in Liberia, and then you can basically work with mobile money and then the remittance product to create a service that will allow you to transfer money to their mobile money accounts locally. So if you pick a product like so, click on that this arrow, you have some information about the product, etc., and how it works. If you like, you can see full documentation. But what we'll do is we'll just click on subscribe. Okay, so now we'll be presented with this page, and then they will tell us what to do, what not to do, and you read the description, just a little information, and you can give it a name. For me, I'll just keep it as it is, and then accept this terms of service. If you want to read it, you can click and read it. Okay, ready, read that. So I'll click on confirm, and once you do that, you'll be presented with your subscription. So now we are subscribed to one product. Okay, so let's go ahead now and see the next step. If you look at the documentation once more and click on the get started, after you sign up for your account, which we've already done, we subscribe to our product, and then we went to our profile, so our subscription, the same kind of thing. And then next we need to generate an API user. Okay, so when you're using the sandbox environment to kind of interact with this service, like to test it out and play around it, you don't have the option within your profile to generate your API user. So you need to do it through the REST API that they provide in the sandbox environment. Okay, so we'll go to the sandbox environment and then pick the product that we subscribe to. So if you can remember, we subscribe to remittance, and then I'm going to open that up and then go down to so you can see basically all the endpoints associated with the remittance service. So you have the endpoint to request for access token, create an OAuth2 token, check your account balance of your wallet. You can get the basic user info, transfer status. Okay, so these are the endpoints associated with this service. So now to create an account, so for the sandbox environment, you need to come to this sandbox user provisioning, and here you need to you can read some information about this endpoint. So basically it is used to create an API user in the sandbox target environment. Okay, because it's the sandbox environment that we're playing. So now you can check the request header. You need to provide a reference ID, which is going to be of type they say string here, but I'm saying format UUID. So basically you need to provide a UUID string. Okay, and then it's going to be a UUID version 4 type. Okay, so you need to also provide a content type, but this one is optional. And also you need to provide a OCP APM subscription key. So what is that? Okay, that's a subscription key which provides you access to this API. So basically when you subscribe to the API, you have access to the API. You can find it basically in your profile and have a link here to your profile. So let's see that. If you go down, I think it's one of those keys. Okay, so you can show it. I will delete this thing at the end of the video so you can see it, no problem. Now let's come back here and check out the responses. Okay, so when you successfully call this API, you'll be presented with a 201 created response. And yeah, if something goes wrong, you have a bad request, and you can see pretty much like a Swagger documentation thing. And they have sample codes here. Okay, you have, if you want to use Perl, you want to use C#, Java, JavaScript, etc. We are Java guys, so we're going to look at the Java type. Yeah, basically that's it. So let's test the thing right here first. So we're going to test it in the sandbox environment. So right now, to create an API user, we need to provide a reference ID, which is going to be of type UID. And then for that, after you provide that, you need to also provide the OCP APIM subscription key. which is auto-populated here for us because they are sandbox environment. Okay, and then you provide, basically that's all you need to do. All right, so let's try to generate some random UUID. So I'll just open Google and type on random UUID version 4 generator, like so, and it's going to provide me one random one. I'm just going to copy it and head over to this sandbox API testing environment and paste that. Once I do that, I will click on send, and yeah, I have 201 created. So now we have our API user. There's also another endpoint that we can call to get the API user, basically. Okay, so let's test that out. So we're going to click on this endpoint and try it out. Now, to get the API user, you need to provide the reference. So basically, it is this ID that we use to create the user. So I'm going to copy that same ID and just paste it in here, like so, and run the request. So now we have 200. Okay, we have some information back about the user, the target environment, and then the provider callback was just something to show that we have the user and it's working. Now, next you need the API user key, okay, or the API key. So this is the endpoint to call in order to get the API user key. Okay, so here we're gonna click on that endpoint and then look at what we need to provide. We need to provide the ID of the user, and then the same OCP API subscription key, and yeah, basically that's it. And then in the response, if everything goes well, we'll get the API key. So let's try that out. We click on try it, and then we pass in the, I'll just paste it because it's already in my clipboard. And then next we send the request. So that's it, we have our API key. Okay, so this is gonna be useful to test other endpoints in the service that we selected. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and paste it somewhere. All right, now that I've copied this, I'm going to paste it in a text editor here, and I'll just give it some labels so that I'll know. API key, and also I will get my user ID so that I don't lose it when the browser closes, and just paste it here, user UID, like so, and I'll just paste it here as well. Nice. So now we have all this information that we need to start consuming our API. Now basically the first let's go ahead now into, we have this is the setup process for provisioning an API user and getting an API key. Next, we need to start consuming the APIs, let's say the endpoints associated with the service that we selected. So in our case, we selected, we subscribe to the remittance service. So basically we can, talk to any of these APIs. We can perform a transfer operation, we can get the transfer status, we can basically call any of those endpoints. But all of these endpoints, to talk to them, you need to provide an access token. So the first thing to do before calling any of these endpoint is to get an access token. So let's go ahead and create an access token. They already have an endpoint set up here for us. And to create an access token, you need to provide in the request header a header type of authorization or key of authorization, and then the value should be a basic authentication. So this is going to be a combination of our API user ID, okay, and then the API key, and this information should be sent in as a base 64. It should be encoded as a base 64. It will be concatenated to the basic string. Okay, so that's what we need to provide as an authorization value to send to this endpoint. So let's test this out and see. So click on try it, and as you can see, I need to provide this authorization. So it needs to start with basic, okay, and then I need to provide the API key and the user ID. So it's a user ID colon the API key, right? But we need to put them in the base 64. So for that, I'll just search for a quick utility online. So I'll say string to base 64 online converter, something like this. Base 64 encode. So this one is going to encode a specific kind of string for us. So in our case, it's going to be our user, this code, this user ID, like so, and then you put colon, and then the API key that you retrieved for that specific user, like so. So now once I click on encode, this online utility is going to change it for me to base 64. Okay, so I just copy this base 64 string right here, and then come back to my endpoint and paste it here. Remember, I have a space. Oh, come on. Okay, I have space between the basic and this base 64 string. So let's test this out and see if we'll have an access token. Awesome, we got 200 response. So as you can see clearly, we got our access token. So with this access token, now we can, interact with all the other endpoints in this service that we subscribe to. So let's go ahead and do that next. Okay, so now I will copy this token because we will need it to call other endpoints. I'll press Command C and copy it. Next, I'll come here and pick one of these endpoints. So basically, I'll just pick a get account balance endpoint just for testing purposes. And we'll need to provide this authorization in the target environment. Okay, so let's try it out. Okay, so for the authorization, remember the token is gonna be of type is a bearer token, in fact. So we have to put the keyword bearer and space the token value. Okay, now we have the token value. We need to pass in the environment. So the environment is the sandbox environment. Okay, this is just the testing environment. Now that we've added that, let's see if we can get some response. And voila, we have a response here. Okay, so you can see clearly that we have a JSON response that has a available balance of 0, which is not a good thing, to see a 0 in your account. But yeah, and the currency is euro. So basically, it depends on if you're actually consuming the application, the API in production. You have the currency of the country that you are going to be operating in. Okay, so for example, if you will be operating in Liberia, you'll see either USD here or Liberian dollar, something like that. So the point here is that we are able to consume the endpoint. Okay, all right, so now you've seen how to use the APIs on the Sandbox platform and on the Momo API website, but that is not going to be the use case in a real life scenario. Okay, what would be the scenario in a real life thing is that you have an app, maybe a mobile app or a web app, that will be talking to your backend service, and then your backend service would then communicate further to the Momo APIs. So we'll be using SpringBoot as our own backend service in this case, and that backend service will be communicating with the Momo API. So now I'm going to show you how to integrate the Momo API inside of a SpringBoot application to allow that service-to-service communication. So let's do that. So there are a few ways that you can quickly bootstrap a SpringBoot project. My favorite way is to use the start.spring.io website. So here you can easily set up quickly a SpringBoot application. So for this project, we'll just go ahead and use a simple Gradle project, and we'll be using Java as our software programming language. And then I will set up quickly the project metadata. Remember, we'll be using Spring Boot 3, which is the latest version of Spring Boot. So just set my property to io.ondev, and then call this one Momo Open API Spring Boot, something like this, Spring Boot demo. Okay, all right, so it's not the best of names, but you get the idea. So the description is, I'm just going to call it the description as implementing MOMO API, something like this. Awesome. So the version of Java will be using the 17, and we'll package our application as a Java, which is cool. Now let's go ahead and add some dependencies. So for dependencies, we need some web support. So I'll add the Spring Web Support here, and then we'll need the option to communicate with the external service. So we need a client that we'll use to communicate with the MOMO API from our backend. So for that, we'll work with the OpenFin client, which is really nice too. It's a declarative API client that you can use to communicate with external services. I'll show you how to set it up. And let me add Lombok, Pablo might need it, and then I'll add the configuration processor, Spring configuration processor. I think basically this is okay. Let me just add the dev tool, SpringBoot dev tools. Okay, so these are the dependencies that we're gonna need. If we need more, we'll come back here and find out. So let's generate the project and bring it into our IDE. Okay, now we have our project open inside of IntelliJ IDE. Let's go ahead and set up some few configurations. Okay, so the first thing I like to do is to change this application.properties to application.yaml. So just click on refactor, rename, and I'll change this extension to the YAML extension, YAML, which is pretty convenient. So now we can open this file and do a few setups. So let me set the application port. So say server.port, and I'm gonna run this one on 8282. You can run it on whatever port you want. And then let's set up some basic Spring configuration. Spring.application name, I'm just gonna call it MOMO API demo, something like this. Okay, awesome. So now we'll come back here later. Let's now create a few packages within our Java folder. So here I'll create a new package, and I'm going to call this one an app. I'm going to call it config like so, and then I'll create another package. I'm going to call this one client. Okay, so this client's package is going to host all of the clients in your application, the clients that will communicate with external services. All right, so now let's go ahead and set up our clients. Okay, so now let's configure our OpenFin client that we use to communicate with with the external service, which is the mobile money API service. So to do that, firstly we need to enable OpenFin client. So I'll come to my main application class and add the annotation at enable fin client. Now with this annotation, I can configure fin clients within this project. So you can now go ahead and create your clients wherever you will want. And in our case, we have a package dedicated for that. And I'll create our first client. So our client is going to be a Java interface. Now we're just going to call this one MOMO API client, like so. And then we'll annotate it with at fin client annotation. Now, if you've created some type of REST APIs before using Spring Boot, the fin client is similar to the REST controller. So you basically, the difference is that here you don't write implementation, you just define the methods using the same annotation that you use on the in the REST controllers. Okay, I'll show you that. But firstly, let's give some configuration to this client. So we're going to give it a name, and we'll just call this one Open API client. Okay, this Open API client is the name. We also need to pass it the base URL. Okay, so the base URL will be we'll just copy this one from this API documentation. So I'll copy this line here. Okay, awesome. So let me just get up to the let me remove this part. So basically this is going to be our base URL, since this is the service we subscribe to. All right, let's just keep it like this. So now we need to create the first endpoint. The first endpoint we want to consume, we need to declare it inside of the REST client. That's why OpenFin is a declarative web clients, some stuff. So to declare it, we need to know what kind of endpoint are we calling. So this is a get account balance endpoint, and the type of method that is used to call this endpoint is a get method. So we need to define that here. We need to define a get mapping and pass it this URI, and then it needs to return something. Okay, so we just call the method get account balance, like so. Okay, and that's all we're gonna do. So now we need to know the type of data type that is API when you call this endpoint gonna return. So if you look here in the documentation, you can see that it returns a JSON that has in it this value. So we need to create a DTO, which is a data transfer object that will hold this value when the API returns it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a DTO. I'll just right click here, new Java class, and I'll just call this one account balance DTO, like so. And I'm gonna change this to a record, and then we do something like this. Okay, so let's look at it again. It's gonna be a type string, and it's gonna return it. So let's create this attributes. String available balance string what's that, currency. Okay, awesome. Now we have our DTO to hold that value for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and put it inside of our client instead of returning an object like this. So return account balance DTO. Now this client will work if the endpoint we are trying to call does not have any other requirement. But as we know, to call this endpoint, you need to pass some information. You need to pass the authorization, you need to pass the target environment, you need to pass the OCP API subscription key, and we are not doing that in this case. So what we'll do is that to configure all those things, we'll add a configuration. Okay, so I need to put a comma here to put a configuration, and then I'll just call this one MOMO API config. Okay, this class is not yet created, so we need to create it. So to create this class, I just copy the name and then come inside my config package here, and then I'll create a Java class with this name. Okay, so inside of this config class, we will define the configurations that we need to this endpoint that we are trying to communicate to. Okay, so this class is going to be a configuration class. Okay, so we're going to annotate it with at configuration, like so, and inside of it we will define a bean. Okay, so we'll define a bean like so, and this bean will return to us a type of request interceptor. All right, so we just call it request interceptor, and what this request interceptor does is that it will return a request template. I will explain this to you shortly, like so, and then we'll use the lambda expression in Java, and for each request template, this request template we'll go to add a header, and in this header we need to specify the header type, the header name. Okay, so if you look at our API requirement here, we need to pass these headers. So we need to pass authorization, xtarget, and the OCP thing. So we'll pass the authorization, and then we need to pass in this authorization here. Okay, and then we need to add the second header, which is the X target environment. So I'll just copy this value and then put it in there like so, and then the value for that as well. And then the next header is no comma here. I just need to enter dot header, and I'll copy this final header that we need to pass like so, and then we'll pass in the value. All right, so once we've done this, we can now go ahead and we've already configured this config to our client here. If you look, you can see here we have it here inside our configuration. So I'm going to show you now how to get the values that we need to pass in there. Some of the values are pretty straightforward. For example, the OCP subscription key, you can get this from your profile. Okay, and when you come to your profile, I need to log in. I'll do that. Now I'm logging. If you come here, you can get your key from here. All right, so you just copy this key out of the primary or secondary, but I prefer you do the primary. Once you click on show, you copy this value. You can then, I'll just copy it, and then we'll put that value here. Okay, next is the target environment. So remember, we are experimenting against the sandbox environment, so the target environment will be sandbox. So write sandbox here. The next one is this authorization. The authorization to call this endpoint, the endpoint will be a bearer token, authorized access token. So you need to firstly pass in the bearer like so, plus the access token. Okay, now the access token is another endpoint. Okay, to get the access token we need to call another endpoint. So let me go to the sandbox and show you what I'm talking about. Inside the remittance here, because this is the product that we subscribe to, we need to call this endpoint create access token to get an access token. All right, so the way we'll do that is we'll create a new token, a new client. So I'm going to come to clients. I'll create a brand new client that we'll use to get the token for us. All right, so I'll just call this MOMO API of token. Okay, and this is going to be an interface. So I'll show you how to configure this right now. So as always, we annotate this client here with @fin client annotation and provide it with some metadata. So give it a name, and we're going to call this one MOMO API of client, something like this. And we also need to pass a base URL, so pass in the URL for this, and it's going to be create access token URL, this one. Okay, now I'll paste it in like so, and we need to create a method that will return to us an object. So this is going to be let's look at the type of request that we need to send to create a token. It's a post request. All right, so we'll create a post mapping inside our fin client, a post mapping to this endpoint. All right, now let's go ahead and create the method signature. We'll be returning from this place an object of this type. So if you look at the API documentation, the response will be this. It will return to us a document or an object that looks like this, an access token, token type, and the expiry. Okay, the time that it was expired. So we need to create a DTO to host this information. So I'm gonna create a brand new DTO here. We'll call it this one, and it's gonna be a type Java record. I'm gonna call it authentication response DTO. okay, and it's going to return to us a string value of type access token, a string with the name of access token, like so. If I can spell string correctly. Alright, and then the next one is the token type. So it's going to be a string token type. Why am not spelling string? Something wrong with mine. Okay, and then we need to pass in the expires in as well. So expires in, like so. It's gonna be a type of integer. All right, and I'll just remove this trailing comma. Now this is the object that will represent the response inside of Java. Okay, and we need to do a few more things. So let's configure some JSON serialization here, so that we can safely map this JSON value, the JSON key here, to our object that we just created. Because if you look here we have access token, and then inside of our TTO we have camel cases. Okay, so let's just put some annotation above it here to inform the Jackson library when it's deserializing and doing serialization, to know what to map to what. So we'll add this annotation called JSON property. Okay, so in this case it will be access token. Okay, so when the Jackson library is deserializing this object, it will map this access token key to this attribute right here, and we'll do the same for the other ones as well. So add JSON property token type, and then the final one, add JSON property expires in. Okay, so our DTO is now set and ready to be used. So let's go back to our client here, and then we will be returning this DTO. So it's called authentication response DTO, and then we're just going to say get access token. Okay, like so. Now when you want to request for an access token when you want to request for an access token, you also need to pass in some headers. Okay, so if you remember when we were testing it out before, we passed in a basic header. Okay, and in that basic header we added the API user ID and the API key in a base64 form. So remember, we converted the values here to base64 and copy this one, and then we concatenated it to basic. Okay, we concatenated it to the basic this basic word. And that way we're able to obtain an access token. So we have to do the same thing inside of here. So for that we use a very handy annotation. This annotation is called add request header. So this add request header will take a value that we'll set soon, and then it helps us to set a header on this request. When this request is going out, it will add a header on the request. So we want to add the authorization. Okay, and then this value will pass it in at the time of calling this endpoint. Okay, I will show you how we pass that when we call this method. And then the next header is this header, the OCP subscription thing. So we need to pass it in here, and then we need to map it to a string, and we're just going to call it subscription key. Okay, so now whenever we need to call this endpoint, when we call this method get access token, we need to pass in two values. Okay, we need to pass in the authorization value and then the subscription value, and then this annotation we add it automatically for us in the headers list that will be sent to this endpoint. All right, so now we have configured this. Let's now create a service that will actually make use of this access, this endpoint that we have created, this client. So we'll come here, and then inside of our application, okay, I'll create a new package. Okay, I'll create a new package like so. I'll just call it services, and inside the services I'll create a new service class like so. Now just call this one I'll call it, I think I'll just call it off provider. Okay, access token provider, something like this. Okay, and we'll annotate this with the add service annotation, and then I will also make use of the require as constructor, and then we will inject our API. All right, so we'll use this technique, private final, and then this API client that we want to inject is the MOMO API of client. MOMO API of client, I'll just call it of client like so. MOMO API. Oh, okay, I need to rename that. Let me just rename it so that we'll be in sync with the naming. MOMO API of client like so. Okay, now it's looking good. All right, so we will create one method inside of this class that the only job of that method will be to get the access token for us. Okay, so we'll call it it will be a public method, public, and it will return for us a string. Okay, the string will be the access token. So return for us a string, we'll call it get access token like so. All right, now this method we will we'll firstly need a string. Okay, so we need to first define our header that we will pass. So the header will be obviously a string, and we're going to call it header, and this header is going to be the, if you can remember, it's going to be the combination of the API user ID and the API key in base 64. Okay, so now let me do that. We'll call this utility method in Java. It's called base 64. This will help us to encode the string to a base 64 value. All right, so call the get encoder, and then we then choose the type of encoding to do. We want to encode the string, and then we need to pass inside of it some value. Okay, so for this I will just use a string format value like so, and then I'll use this syntax format, and then I'll pass in this to represent this first %s represents the first value that we will pass as argument, and then the colon, and then %s as the second value. So this will be our API user ID, and then this will be the API key. Okay, the API user key. So now these values we need to pass in here, and if you can recall, we copied them somewhere. So I will just copy the API user ID first, and then bring it in here, and I'll paste it since it's a string. And then the second one is I'll copy this one, is the API key. I'll just copy this one like so, and then I'll paste it in as well. All right. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to get the bytes. Okay. To get bytes. What is happening here? We have some problems. Let's see. Let's figure it out quick. I will just go right back here, like so. So string.format, and then we pass in our strings like so, and then comma, and then we pass in the values that we need to format actually. Okay. I think I see the problem. We should call the get bytes on this place right here. Okay, so that fixed the issue for us. All right, so now we are good. So next we have our header. Now we also need the we now need to call this client. Okay, so I'll just use the var keyword here and say of response. Okay, and then we'll call our of client dot. Remember, we created a method called get access token, and this get access token, if you look at it here, it takes two arguments: authorization and the subscription key. So we need to pass these two values. All right, so the first one is the header, which will represent our authorization, and for that we'll bind the keyword basic. Okay, basic plus, so to join it to the header. So this header now is going to be our base64 string. Okay, so it's going to be like so, and then we'll pass in the second argument, which will be our subscription key. So remember, we can get our subscription key from here. Come to your profile and just show it, and I'll just copy this one. Okay, all right, so now we have our subscription key, we have our header set, we just put a semicolon there. Awesome. Just like this, we have our response and our API, our authentication response, because this is what this method returns. Now for this, we can return the access token like so. Okay, so I hope you get the flow. So this way we are able to call our access token and get it. The next thing to do is to now inject this access token provider inside of our MOMO API config, so that we can get our actual access token, the access token string. Okay, so we will inject it here. So let me add firstly the add required args constructor, so that we can easily do dependency injection. So the private final, and then we inject our access token provider. I'm just going to call it provider, and I'll put semicolon. So here our access token now will be coming from this provider. So it's a provider dot get access token like so. See, now we have connected all the pieces. Okay, so basically this should be request, just to fix the typo. Okay, so now we have set up everything that we need to talk to our remittance endpoint. Okay, we have everything set up to talk to this endpoint here, remittance. All right, so we are trying to call this endpoint, this get account balance endpoint. So we already configured everything we need to talk to it. Okay, so let me recap quickly before we we proceed. What we've done so far is, let me show up here. We created an API client called Momo client, and we've set up it with this base URL. And then we create this request that will grab the balance. But remember, to grab the balance, we need to pass along with this request some headers. So these headers, we are configuring them inside this Momo API config. Okay, so these headers have the values of, you need to pass in the authorization, the X targeting, and then the OCP API subscription key. So we grab these values, because these ones are easy to get. We just get them directly and paste them here. And then we also need to pass in an access token. So to get the access token, we make use of this provider. Okay, we created a provider. So inside of this provider, we have defined a method called get access token, and this get access token method will actually make use of another client that we created, which is this Momo API of client. This Momo API of client has the responsibility of going to call another endpoint inside this service, and then this endpoint, okay, this one create access token, and this one will return to us our access token. So we've configured all of those things to work correctly. So now let's go ahead and continue the build. So now let's test this implementation that we've done. To test it, I will create a bin in the main class. Let me close all the other classes. So close other tabs. I'll create a bin in the main class. I'll call this bin application runner. Okay, so just call it application runner, and this bin will start. It will kick off automatically once our SpringBoot application is correctly booted. Once the application context is loaded, this bin will be triggered automatically. So inside of this bin, I want to trigger the client that is going to call our remittance API to get the account balance. So let me do this require as constructor thing here so that we can inject that client easily. So private finder, and it's called Momo API client. Okay, just got a Momo API client like so, and here we'll be returning some arguments like so, and inside here I need to put a semicolon here. So now once this thing is triggered, we want to call this get account balance API, okay, through the client that we have configured already. So we want the response on that to be stored here, and then I will call the Momo client dot get account balance. Okay, so now this is where the thing is going to get triggered. So the response from it is going to be stored in this variable, and now I can log it. Okay, so I will just put SL4J annotation here to enable me to do login easily. So I'll do log.info, and I'll just call this one account balance from Momo API, and then I'll just put some placeholder, and I will pass in the response like so. All right, so we are not doing anything so technical or crazy. We just grabbing the response that we get from this guy from calling this endpoint, and then we basically log in it at the startup phase of the application once the application context is fully loaded. So let's go ahead and test this and see how it works. So I will click on this run button to run the application, and it's compiling. Okay, now we have some problems, and we have problem with executing a request to this method, to this endpoint, the token endpoint. Let's see, let's open the off client, and oh yes, exactly. So basically we need to pass in the URI here, all right, because here normally we just pass in, we should only pass the base URL. So let's say in this case we want to get the token, So we need to pass the URI as well, like so. All right. So let's test it again and see if that fixes the problem. All right, now we have another problem, 400 bad requests. So when you have 400 bad requests, if you look at the documentation, when you have 400, I think it's not here, but if you normally have a 400 bad request, it means that you send some value that is not good. So probably we send some value that is not good. So let's verify. The endpoint that we're trying to call is this one. So let's go to that one, that client. And then we are not actually sending any value, but instead we are sending some headers. So let's check the configurations in that thing, and let's see what we are getting wrong. And yes, the bearer needs to have a space. Okay, so this is the guy that was causing the problem. So let's go ahead now and save this and rerun the application again. And did I rerun it? Okay, so it's gonna reload, and let's see what happened next. Okay, and it's taking some time recompiling, and now we have a brand new error. This is how we learn, by getting lots of error. So we have a response from the client saying request resource was not found, the code not found. So what could that possibly mean? Let's run this thing again and see. Okay, so now we have the resource. So that was not really our error, it was the error from the client. Okay, you know, it's a sandbox environment, so things can change quite a bit. So we got our actual response. If you look here, we have account balance, and then the available balance is 1,000, and then the currency is euros. So we were able to successfully communicate with the MOMO API endpoint from within our SpringBoot application. Okay, so let me show you one more thing before we finish this video. I will go to the part of the core where we get the access token. Okay, so this access token provider, and I will add the SL4J login capability to log the access token too. Okay, so I'll call this access token, and then it's going to come from here. So I want you to see the access token so now as well. So I reload the application. Once the context is fully loaded, it will initiate my whole thing. So now if you look through the logs, you'll see that we have our access token here logged. So we're able to go connect to the access token endpoint, grab our access token, and then use that access token to call the account balance endpoint to get the account balance. So you see now the account balance is zero. It's a sandbox environment, so things change just to play around. So now you get the idea. This is how you integrate external APIs within your application. Using OpenFin client, it becomes really easy. So you saw how we did it. Now you can build any kind of application, then expose some APIs that clients can call, and once they call those APIs, your service now can go ahead and do other external communication it needs to get the information that it requires to do some computation. All right, so that's it. So before we end this video tutorial, I want to show you some best practices. Remember, in this application, we copied codes, let's say values manually, and then pasted it inside of our Java code. This works, but it is not the correct way of doing things. Okay, so to do it correctly, it is recommended approach to put all of your configurations inside of inside this place, the application.properties or application.yamls file. You externalize basically all of your configurations so that your application can be stateless as possible. So configurations should be stored only on the on the environment, and then they can be passed in as argument to your application. Basically, that is the way things should be done. Let's just correct that and fix it so that we can have our application properties outside. So to do that, we'll create a new I'll just create a new package, and I'll call it props. Okay, so inside this props package, I'll create a Java class that I will call MOMO API config, something like this. And then this will be a configuration. Okay, and this configuration it will also be a configuration property, so we'll call it configuration properties. So this class is going to be a configuration property, and it will be initiated. Let's say it will be the prefix. Let me close these other tabs and create room. The prefix will be my dot I'll just say MTN, and then what should I call it? Okay, my.mtn momo. Okay, so basically inside of our application.properties file here, we will create some configuration that will start with my, like so, MTN. So all the configurations that will pass that will start with my and MTN will grab their properties, will be mapped to this configuration file. Okay, so now let's add some Lombok annotations to simplify our life. So we'll add the data annotation from Lombok to get our data and setters. We'll add the all args constructor. We'll add the no args constructor, and then we'll add the builder annotation as well. So now we can go ahead and create the properties we need. So basically we need a few properties. So first one, we need the property for our environment. So it's going to be private string, and it's going to be called target environment. Okay, and then we need another one. This will be for our OCP APIM. Remember this OCP this thing. Okay, we need to pass this value too, but as a configuration property. So let me just look at the spelling to be correct. Okay, I'll change it to camel case. Subscription key. Okay, and then the next one is the API key. Okay, that is the API key from the user. And then we need the API user ID as well. Awesome. So now we have these values. We can use them in our thing correctly inside of our. We can pass them here. All right. So let me split this into two screens so that we can see. Okay. Now this is looking good. So the first property we need to pass is the target environment, like so, and then we can pass in the value. So let me just type it in our case it's sandbox. So now you can basically pass this value as an environment variable, you know, when you run your application, instead of hard coding it inside of your project code. Okay, so you externalize it. I'll show you how to bring it into your code. So now let's add the other one. The other one will be the OCP. Let's add the OCP this thing. OCP. I'll just do it like this. APIM subscription key, and they will pass in some value there. And then we'll need the API key. We'll pass in some value there, and then the API user ID. Okay, and then we'll pass in some value there. Now, for all of this to work, we need to enable configuration properties within the application. So I will just do it right here and at enable configuration properties. Awesome. Now I'll close that, and let's put the correct values that we need for these things. Okay, so we have the sandbox. Let's get the API key. So our API key, we know that we can get it from our profile. Not our API key, but our subscription. We can get it from there. So we'll just paste that value here, and then what else we need, I'll just close this so that you see correctly. We don't need this anymore, we're good. And now we need the API key. So the API key, remember, we have it here, so I'll just copy it, and I will bring it in my code like so. Now we need the API user ID. I'll copy it from here, and bring it in my code. Okay, awesome. Now we have externalized the configuration. Let's go ahead and replace it in our application. All the places that we pass in this hard-coded values, we want to use our configuration property that we created. All right, so I will close this, and let's open firstly our provider. So I'll go to service, access token provider. Remember, you see we're passing in these values here, hard-coded. So we don't want to do that anymore. We want to inject our configuration property. So it's private final, and it's called MOMO API props, I think, if I can recall. MOMO API. Let me verify from here. MOMO API config. Okay. MOMO API config. Let me rename this to config props. That way, it can be easy to identify. MOMO API config props. I'm just gonna call it props. Okay. So now that we have our properties, we can get the values directly. So no need to hard code this one. I'll just remove this one. So this is our user ID. So we'll say props dot get user ID, API user ID. See, just like that. And then here is our API key, right? So props dot get API key, just like that. We replace everything. And here is our subscription key. We don't need to pass it in like so. We can get it from the properties as well. Props dot get subscription, like so. See, everything is now looking neat and perfect. So you can easily change these values inside of your application properties, and your application will still work correctly. So let's go ahead and do the change in the other places that we use them. So I think we use it inside of the MOMO API config as well. So here we're already getting our token, dynamically by calling another API. Here we don't want to pass in the environment variable directly like so. Okay, so we'll remove this, and we'll inject our properties file, and it's MOMO API props. Okay, not this one, API config props. We're going to call it props. Okay, and then we can grab the values from here. Props dot get target environment. So now this is also coming from our properties file, and here we can change this key by getting it from our props like before. Props dot get API and subscription key. So now you can see that all of our properties are coming in directly from our properties file. So we don't need to manually code them inside the application. So things you like when you build an application like this, it is basically cloud native. So it is resilient. It can run on any platform. You just need to configure the variables that you need to pass on that platform, and your application will remain solid. Okay. So let's test this out and see if these changes we made actually works. So I will click on this run button to see if our changes is working correctly. Okay, now we have a 401 deny, access deny error, and this is at the time of calling the token endpoint. So what is happening? we have access denied due to missing subscription key. Okay, so probably we are not configuring something correctly. Let's verify our properties. Okay, so here is my.mtn momo. Let's see, and here is my MTN, so we should add dash momo. All right, because this is a one-to-one mapping. Okay, so now you see all those squiggly orange lines are gone. So now it is mapping correctly these values. So before, the value for the subscription key was null, that's why it gave us error. So let's now run it again and see if it will work. Awesome. So you see we have all of our values now correctly. We got our token and we use that token to call our account balance endpoint. All right, so using this technique, you can basically go ahead and configure all of the other endpoints. If you come here, API sandbox, all the endpoints inside this remittance, for example, you can consume all of them basically using the strategy that we've implemented, and you have your response. You can post for maybe making a transfer, you can check the transfer status, you can get user info with consent, you can basically call any of those APIs and you will get your response correctly because we've configured OpenFin client to work with the backend of with the service. So things are looking good. All right. Okay guys, that's how we come to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, consider liking this video, share it with your friends, and if you are new to this channel, consider subscribing. Thank you very much. See you next time.